Hey, it's Angie, and welcome to Midlife Magic and Mayhem. Today I'm speaking with Amanda Thebe, personal trainer and fitness professional with almost 30 years in the fitness industry. She has also authored the book Menopocalypse, which is one of the best book titles I think I've ever heard. She is Canada's first menopause coach and educator. Through menopause advocacy and education, Amanda provides on-site or virtual presentations in the workplace to improve productivity, retention, and attendance for female employees, helping companies to normalize the conversation around menopause and provide support which impacts 100% of their female employees. Amanda has lived in the UK, Canada, and the USA and has been exposed to all of those healthcare systems, and her book is a bestseller in these countries. She's a popular guest on podcasts, radio, TV, and online summits, and she brings a refreshing humor and no-nonsense approach to subjects usually shrouded in shame. Through her frank articles, hilarious social media posts, and inspirational and entertaining talks, Amanda continually inspires the loyal readers on her social media. Her exercise workouts, health and fitness tips have been featured in Shape, Prevention, Healthline, CBC Radio, Global News Canada, The Doctors, Lifehacker, Breaking Muscle, Girls Gone Strong, and Ultimate Sandbag Training. In this conversation, she talks about how hard perimenopause hit her, physically, mentally, and emotionally. She reveals with honesty what it was like and how the symptoms seemed to come from nowhere to the point she didn't recognize who she was anymore. She shares her journey of creating tools for herself to powerfully guide her through this life threshold, which inspired her to ultimately write this book. She is a joy to be with, and I'm sure you'll get so much from this conversation. I know I certainly did. Hello, Amanda. Thank you so much for being on Midlife Magic and Mayhem.
Thanks for having me, Angie. I'm excited about your new podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. And I am thrilled to have you here because you are speaking to one of my favorite topics and one of my passions, which is health, fitness, nutrition, especially for women, and now especially for women in the middle stages of life, and especially perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. And you have written a fabulous book, which I have now in my possession. I just got it a couple of days ago. So, and it's so great. Like the pages that I have read are really, really good. So I highly recommend everybody picking that up if you're within our phase of life. So yeah, it's been brilliant. So I'm curious, I always like to start with asking someone what it is that you're seeing right now. And seeing, I mean, like actually physically, like right in front of you. Like, where are you? Where are you in your room? Where are you in your house? Where are you in your office? Like, what do you see right now?
Oh, it's not the best. And in fact, if I was to span the camera around my room, you'd see a lot of moving boxes because I do move around a little bit. You can tell I'm English, but I have lived in Boston, Toronto, Texas, Houston, Texas, and then I'm back in Canada again. Been back in Toronto now for 18 months, and we've been looking to buy a house all that time. And the housing market sucks, and it really pisses me off, but we're in a temporary rental, and I refuse to unpack all the boxes only to have to move again. And so I'm in limbo. I'm in property limbo at the moment, but I do like living in Toronto, and I'm glad to be back here. You know, the people here, the sensibility, the culture, the restaurants, you know, it's a really fun place to live, apart from in the winter, which is now.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Just as a quick note, we moved from Charleston, South Carolina, where we had lived for 16 years, raised our kids there. We just moved to Boulder, Colorado a year ago. And it's cold here.
You know,
I'm from the southern United States, so I'm not used to cold weather really. So, but I love it. It's so much fun. But we're renting. The real estate market does suck. It's not a fun thing to do. So I totally get you there.
Yeah. But I love South Carolina. I also love Colorado. So both really cool places. Yeah.
They are. Well, tell me a little bit about your story. How did you, I know you've been in the fitness industry, you've been a personal trainer for, I believe, over 20 years. Tell me a little bit about who you are and your story and how you got here.
Yeah, so it's actually, I mean, I say 20 years, but really it's 30 years because I'm in my 50s now. But I grew up in the northeast of England where, you know, you had to do something, otherwise you'd end up like getting into trouble, you know, drinking too much, probably getting pregnant or something terrible, and that you don't want to happen when you're 16. And so my mum saw that I was like this restless kid, and she put me in a martial arts class. And so growing up, I was a really active kid. I used to do martial arts. I trained for my Dan grade and my black belt, and like always loved exercising, and at a young age got into the habit, which is why I'm a big fan of like kids moving, because when it becomes as repetitious as cleaning their teeth, they just do it, right? Like, and anyway, so it was a really good setup for me. And then I actually went into the tech industry, but I continued to do sort of fitness as a passion, as a hobby. You know, I've done everything. I've been there, done that type thing. I've been in the aerobics, the spin, the step, the body pump, you name it, I've done it. And I did my personal training certification in the 90s, and I also did nutrition certifications in my 90s. So, you know, I've been in the game for about 30 years, and actually moving into my 40s felt like a really good sort of example to women that, you know, the message that when we're getting older, it's, you know, we're all done and dead for type thing. And I was hoping to give inspiration to women to say, you can still be strong, you can still be capable, and this is how. And I never sort of did it as like an in your face type message, but rather than I'm like you and we can do this together type thing. And I was like kept banging on about all of the lifestyle things that like have literally set me up for life. And then I sort of hit my early 40s, sorry, about 42, and I started to feel particularly unwell. And it was life altering, you know, the symptoms I was dealing with. And I was trying to get medical help, and I spent about 2 years in the Canadian medical system looking for help, until I finally met a doctor that said to me, what you're experiencing is symptoms of perimenopause that I see in the day, every day, in and out every day, and I can help you. And I was like, hang on, stop, you know, shut the door. What are you talking about? Like, what's perimenopause? So this is 10 years ago. I'd never heard of the word. I mean, now we hear it all the time, thankfully. But, well, maybe we're in a menopause bubble. But at the time, I'd never heard the word perimenopause. And I had that idea that, you know, you had to be old. You had to just have some hot flashes, your periods had stopped. Like, there was a lot I didn't understand about it. And I then got a little bit miffed, because I thought, I've spent decades in the health and wellness industry, and I've had like blinkers on. Why don't I know about this? Why doesn't even the fitness industry talk about this? Instead, I've got these crusty old white men leading the fitness industry going, oh, just push through like the rest of us getting older. And it's sort of not the case. It's much more nuanced than that. And so I felt cheated, I suppose. And so falling down the perimenopause rabbit hole, I came out of it with a big Facebook community, a social media presence talking about my experience, and then the book. And like you said, you're enjoying the book when the few pages you've read of it, but I hope that when people read the book, they hear me and they hear my voice, because the reason I wrote the book in the style that I did was because everything I tried to read, Angie, out there was not palatable. It was either too medical that I couldn't absorb it. It just became too much, or it was too flippant and too funny, and it wasn't real enough. And so my book is real, it's honest, there's some humor in there, it's highly evidence-based, and it's practical, and there's solutions. And so that was the book I wanted to read myself when I was going through it.
That's really the sense that I get from holding the book now in my hands. And again, reading what I have read, I actually want to read one paragraph that like had me do some jumping jacks and like pump up my hands in my office. And it's in the introduction, and finally I started talking about my symptoms to anybody and everybody, and I haven't stopped. I don't care if it makes them roll their eyes in boredom. I know that women want and deserve to be heard. We're tired of being ignored, misunderstood, and belittled. We're sick of feeling invisible. If I can do anything with this book, I want to change that whole dynamic. I'm happy to put my vagina on the line for this cause. I was like, yes. Yes, sister.
When I wrote the book, my husband's very private. He's not on any social media, and he's got a prolific career. And I said, "You've got to read this book." And he went, "Why?" And I went, "Well, because everything's out there, everything." And he read the book and he went, "As far as I'm concerned, it's just data. It's just information." And I went, "Good, because I've just been on CBC Radio saying dry vagina and menopause." And he was like, "Oh my God."
It's so brilliant. And that's the sense that I get from the book, and your tone and how you're presenting it. There's great information. There's really solid, practical, daily, useful bits. And it's very much, it feels like a conversation. It feels like when I'm sitting down with this book, you and I are friends and we're out on a walk, right? Like,
Yeah.
and we're talking, and there's that richness of, just like I said, really solid information. So I'm so enjoying it so far and really recommend it. So thank you for writing it in the way that you did.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's funny because people are like, "You're going to write another book?" And I'm like, "Hell no, God." It's a labor of love. And to me, it just was, the reason I did it was because I just have that sort of like empathy in me, like you do, obviously, for doing a podcast like this, where when you've struggled yourself, you really feel compassion and you really understand what women are going through. And so that was my reason for writing the book. And it actually was emotional writing it. It was exhausting. I don't mean like physically finding the time to do it, but just like reliving some of the things that I went through, because I actually feel a little bit traumatized by my whole perimenopausal experience, truthfully. And I think a lot of women do.
Yeah. Will you speak to that a little bit more? Like, do you have specific examples that you would be willing to share?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, so there was physical symptoms that I didn't like urinary incontinence and stress incontinence and a dry vagina and stuff. And like, while I think that's really important to talk about, one of the biggest things for me was struggling with my mental health. So I'd had a very interesting life up until perimenopause, with some, traumatic experiences within that I always felt like I coped with and dealt with really well. I probably dealt with them in a very British way, which was like packing them in a box and putting them in the cupboard and just not ever thinking about them again. And so maybe that came back to bite me somewhat, but I struggled with depression, severe depression, and I didn't know I had depression. And so what was happening is, when I was in the midst of my symptoms, and my main symptom was actually migraines with aura, like a vestibular migraine. So I lost vision and vertigo and feeling in one side of my body. It was awful. But what I was also experiencing was a depression that I'd never had before and I didn't recognize. And so I would wake up every morning almost like exasperated that I had to go through the whole day again, feeling like I felt, and almost thinking, I think I'd resigned myself to being, oh my God, the big personality Amanda's not there anymore. There's just this miserable cow that hates people, hates life, and doesn't want to do it anymore. It was troubling, and I didn't see it in the moment, because I think actually with depression, you don't see it in the moment. And it's a gradual thing that just like this big black cloak that like drags over you. But it impacted the relationship with my husband, my children, my friends, and just everything changed. And anyway, so when my gynecologist said, "You've got migraines, vestibular migraines, I can help you with those, I can help you with your depression, I've got your back," type thing, it was just a big relief for me. And actually, I met my husband afterwards, and we went for lunch, and he said, "Is everything okay? Is everything okay?" Because he'd been like really worried for about 2 years. And I said, "Oh yes, sure. Apparently I'm in a perimenopause and I've got migraines and depression." And he went, "Oh my God, thank God for that. I thought you were going to leave me." I just started laughing, and I went, "Oh my God, you poor thing." Because I had 2 years of not knowing what was going on. I was in the healthcare system in Canada, having every test you can think of, seeing every specialist, from neurologists to physiotherapists to ear, nose, throat doctors. It was so stressful, always going through all of this testing and consultation to be told, "Well, we can see there's something wrong with you, but we don't know what it is." I started to think it was all in my head, right? And so this poor guy didn't have a clue what was going on, neither did my children. And so this was a sense of relief for him, because now he was like, well, now we know what it is. Now we can find out what it is that you need help with, you know, how you can get help. And so he was all over this book, because he was like, well, as well as you struggling, I think partners should read this, because you'll see that as soon as they start reading about it, they can support you. And honestly, my husband's been my biggest rock through all of this, because he doesn't want me to suffer, because when I suffer, they all suffer, you know how it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, I can laugh about it now, but it wasn't funny at the time. It was actually one of the lowest points of my life. And so I just don't want any woman to go through that unnecessarily. No woman should suffer.
Agreed. And I think the education piece is so important, and normalizing the conversation, normalizing the conversation about everything that you just spoke to, from dry vagina to migraines to depression, anxiety, any of these things, because the way I look at this stage of life, we were just speaking about this a couple of minutes ago, is that it is a threshold space. It's like another birth process. And so when we are in the middle of this new threshold, it can be very, you can feel really thrown around and confused, and thoughts are in your head that you've never had before, feelings in your body that you've never had before. And it feels like this big twisting, swirling, like you're being squeezed through something. Right. So I think it's so important to get all this information out there to help women, and to help the partners of women and the families and friends when we're in this period, when we're in this space, to know what to do and to know how to support, and for the women themselves to have the tools like your book and like different pieces of education out there, so that we know, number one, we're not alone, we're not crazy, and that there is magnificence of possibility through this time and on the other side. So I'm just so grateful. Yeah.
And, I think that's the way we need to talk about it. So, menopause is a life transition, right? Like puberty was. Unfortunately, for some reason, the narrative has become quite polarized, that we're hearing the idea that menopause is a long-term hormonal deficiency state, or maybe like a disease state. And it's very disempowering when you hear that. It's also not accurate. It's not supported by the medical community at all, if you read any position statement. But that doesn't mean that this transition is easy. In fact, 75% of women will struggle with one or more symptoms during their perimenopausal phase, which can potentially be between 8 and 10 years. 25% report having severe symptoms that impact their quality of life. I'm assuming that I fit into that 25%, because, I really didn't like my life at all. And so, but by calling it a deficient or a disease state, what you're doing is you're medicalizing a life transition. And when we do that, it assumes the fact that there is no light at the end of the tunnel, that we cannot live in our post-menopausal years without this very low level of estrogen. And that's simply not true. And in fact, I don't know if you've got to it in my book, I talk about the U curve of happiness. It's probably something that you might want to dig into on your podcast, because I think it would be a good fit. And essentially, there's a researcher whose name I obviously can't remember, and I'm blaming my menopause brain for that, from Stanford University, who talks about our happiness in life. And the U curve, if you think about it, the bottom of the letter U is during our midlife phase, and that potentially falls within the awful term of midlife crisis, but potentially our menopausal years, when things are a bit more troubling. But we've also got other things happening in this squeeze generation, in our careers and in our life with children and aging parents. But what the study found is that as we come out of that bottom doldrum bit and we start moving up the other side of the U curve, that's some of the happiest periods of our whole life. And that people in their late 50s and 60s are some of the happiest people on the planet. I'm 52 now, and when I was 42, 44, I didn't think I was going to be happy again. And now I'm super happy. And I feel like I've got my life back. And I just want to keep banging that drum because I keep thinking that women are going through the menopause transition thinking, is it always going to be like this? Is it always going to be this awful? And it's not. It definitely isn't. And there's so much you can do to take control of your health and the outcomes that, you know, these solutions can sort of help with our disease risk prevention, our all-cause mortality prevention, improving our longevity. All of these things are really tangible things that we can do. And if that's not something that can make you happy, I don't know what is, right?
Exactly. So what are some of the things that you have used in your life, during this time period that helped you? Like, what are the things that really helped you the most during this transition phase?
Well, you know, the health world talks about the 5 pillars of health, and I talk about those in my book. I only talk about 4 because I combine a couple of them. But I first of all want to talk about like therapeutics. So the main thing I would like women to know is that if you're struggling with menopausal symptoms that are independent of what your periods are doing, it doesn't have to have anything to do with that. The neurological and emotional and psychological side of perimenopause are very impactful. The hormone therapy, menopause hormone therapy, is considered first line and safest effective treatment for those symptoms. And it has some prevention for bone health as well. Now, if you're struggling with things like vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes and night sweats that are impacting your mental well-being, that are impacting your insomnia, it can be like a game changer for a lot of women. And I highly recommend that you talk to your healthcare provider about that. But I also want to say that not every woman can go on hormone therapy. And not every woman wants to go on hormone therapy, and that's totally fine too. Our bodies are capable of living without hormones, but you still shouldn't suffer. And I think you just have to look at the one woman in front of you and go, what does this person need? Like, so for example, I tried hormone therapy. I really wanted it to work for me, and I have really poor tolerance to hormones, very highly sensitive to hormones, and they made my symptoms worse. That's a known phenomenon. So if you're one of those people, then there are other non-hormonal therapeutics that are indicated for you. I have tons of researches on my resources, I apologize, on my website if anyone wants to go over there. But then regardless of whether or not you're on any therapeutics to help with your symptoms, like dialing into the lifestyle things, there's so much research on this stuff that we know that these are game changers for everyone, not just as women getting older, for men, for everyone, right? And those things are nutrition, looking for a well-balanced nutritional diet that has an abundance of fiber and is plant forward, that contains good quality lean protein, because our body needs that protein as we get older, that contains carbohydrates because carbohydrates are not evil and we need them. It's our body's preferred energy source, and it actually crosses the blood-brain barrier and it feeds the energy of our brain. Eat your carbs, ladies.
Yes.
That doesn't see us eating an abundance of hyperpalatable ultra-processed foods. They should be eaten in moderation and not restricted, but just cut down on them. That sees us reducing our alcohol intake. All of these things are things that are within our control, and they're not crazy. They're just common sense, right? Then the other thing is exercise, like movement. Daily movement is absolutely key. It's key for so many things in our life. Strength training is something I talk about a lot in the book, because strength training has sort of the edge on most exercises with regard to building, maintaining our musculoskeletal system. That's our muscles and our bones. Reducing some of our menopausal symptoms, our hot flashes. They can be reduced by up to 70%, helping with our mental well-being. It's now part of the treatment protocol for depression and anxiety. And it helps improve longevity by about 17%. Like, I could go on and on and on, because to me, there's no downside. It also makes you feel so good and invincible.
Yes.
So, but I think what people forget as well is that just not sitting down a lot and just moving around a lot is really, really good for you, especially if you can do that outside. Like, get outside and walk every day if you can. Keep it simple. Like, don't overcomplicate things. And then the last two, I've lumped two together. I've got stress and sleep, that I go into a lot in the book. And it's sort of like how estrogen impacts our cortisol response, which, you know, we see ourselves going a bit crazy, a bit fiery maybe. And that often impacts sleep, and sleep often impacts stress. So I've put them together because I do believe that you need to work on that thing as one whole thing. And then the last chapter in the book, which is my favorite chapter in the book, I wrote with a psychologist, and it's called Shift Happens, which I think is very funny, but it's all about building a resilient mindset. And it was something that I got the most growth out of, because when I was at my lowest point and I didn't recognize myself, I was like, how am I going to get out of this? What are the tools I'm going to dig into that make me start growing again and making me feel good? And as well as doing I need to move more and look after my diet, meet my friends, be more social, take antidepressants if I need to, all of those things. I just started working on my personal traits, my strengths, and I started making decisions based on my value system. These are psychological tools that you can do. There's like quizzes you can do, and they're in my book. And at the end of it, I just reaffirmed who I was as a person and what I wanted to do with my life and what direction it needed to take. And it was like, oh my God, thank God for that. I know and I'm back on track. And it was just a wonderful thing to do for me. And I highly recommend that if anyone feels a tiny bit lost, consider doing something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much of what you just said. I just resonate with so much, and everything from, you know, during this time, sometimes even the foods we're eating, maybe we could eat the thing that we ate 5 years ago, and now all of a sudden we have a different reaction to it. Alcohol, huge one, right? Like, it doesn't affect us the same. Like, it become way more sensitive. You start to not even like it. Or this is my experience. Like, I have one glass of wine and I'm like, you know, and again, it affects your sleep, and it just like, it's just not worth it. And the hot flashes, and, you know, and that can be, it just changes things, right? It just changes everything. And then the movement and the exercise. And I definitely want to talk about strength training more. But for me, like, when I'm hearing you speak, all of this is a very holistic endeavor, right? It's, you know, I think our societies come so much from, especially the medical industry, comes so much from a very reductionist view. We piece everything apart and deal with everything just as a separate entity, when the human body is a system, and it's made up of a lot of systems. And so incorporating nutrition, movement, I mean, I know in my own experience, like, the more I move, the better I feel. The stronger I am, the better I feel. The better I feel, it affects every single other solitary thing in my life, my relationships, my creativity. I feel sexier, like, you know, the whole thing. Like, you feel stronger, it just makes you feel better. And getting outside and being closer to nature, and the mindset piece, like, all of these things together weave this beautiful tapestry that can hold us and support us through this entire process.
Exactly. And the one thing I would add is that it seems like we've spoken about a lot of different things that people need to do from this 360 multifaceted standpoint. But I'm a huge believer in behavioral change, and I talk about that in the solutions part of the book. And so when I talk about all of these different aspects, I'm like, pick one little thing. We know from tons of data that when you do something small on repeat, rinse and repeat every day, even if you mess up a few days, continue to do it, that's going to be more successful to you than doing something large and extreme that's not sustainable. So always try and look at ways you can impact your life positively in small, sustainable ways for the ultimate sort of positive outcome. And so, yeah, like, I think that, like, if you're somebody who's currently very sedentary, then the first thing you need to do is just not be as sedentary. I mean, don't overthink this. Like, set your alarm and just go for a walk at 10 o'clock. Go and get your coffee. Go walk for a coffee and come back home again. Anything. It all counts. And that's what I keep thinking, is if you can just look for that small win every day and know that everything you're doing matters, you don't feel so bad about things when you don't achieve them. You're just like, okay, I had a sort of not great day. I'm back at it tomorrow, you know?
Exactly. And I love that. I think you do really a great job of presenting it in that way. Small, small, small changes and doable. Like, don't overcomplicate things. Make it simple. Go for a walk for 10 minutes. Again, I just think that's great to really drive that home, that this doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to make a list of 25 things like, okay, well, now I need to go out and do all the things to feel better. It's like,
I don't know about you, but like I live my life like with lists. I think a lot of women do. Where I do this, I do this YouTube like ramble every now and again, Angie, and I talk about my notebooks. I've got thousands of notebooks because I love writing. We all do. We're from that generation, right? Yeah, she's shown me a notebook, and so one of my things is write down your top 3 big hits, big rocks you're going to move today. Stop it with the 25 things on your list. Just do the 3 big ones. But I don't know if you're a follower of James Clear. He's an amazing author. Yeah, most people are. Atomic Habits. And one of the things he says in Atomic Habits is that you should be able to describe the changes that you're going to make within 2 minutes. It has to be very simple. It shouldn't be something that's going to take tons and tons and tons of planning. And what I would say is do something that you know you can do. Because rather than doing something like, all right, I'm going to go vegan for the whole of January, which is something that we see people do, I'm just like, why don't you try and do something that's a little bit more achievable than that? Like, eat vegetables at every meal, or eat them at least 2 of your meals. Because I bet you're not doing that right now. And that's going to be something you can do, and it's achievable. And so normally when you start with something that you know is doable, then the other stuff becomes a little bit easier.
Absolutely. And those small wins add up over time to create a new neural pathway in the brain. And that will help to crowd out any of the other things. And then it feels more natural in your life, right? It's like, oh, well, now I eat vegetables at dinner every day. And I didn't have to make this giant declaration of like, I'm going to be vegan for, I think that does make a huge difference.
Totally. Yeah.
So strength training, I have recently become a huge fan. I've done it off and on a lot in my life, and recently have really picked it back up with intention of like, this is my focus, is strength training. So, we can all, I'm sure, make lots of guesses why this is so important, but it's specifically for women at our age. In this age, I'm 53 at the time of this recording. And so what is it about resistance training, strength training, lifting weights, that type of exercise that is so beneficial right now?
What is it that you're doing? What type of strength training are you doing?
Well, right now, I've worked with personal trainers on and off in the past. And since we've moved to Boulder, I haven't worked with a trainer, but I'm testing a couple of different apps. So we belong to a gym right up the street, and it's a great, just a neighborhood gym. He has wonderful equipment. So like really basic stuff, the foundational things, squats, deadlifts, hinging, pushing, pulling, push-ups, really just the really foundational work, not trying to get too fancy, not trying to do all the crazy hit movement, and just keeping it really simple. Yep.
Yeah, the basics work. So what happens during perimenopause is obviously our estrogen and progesterone start to fall. And estrogen is probably intrinsic in about 200 systems in our body. Women find symptoms in their joints, their guts, their brain health, their hearts, everything, heart palpitations, you name it. It's almost in every system of our body. It also impacts something called muscle protein synthesis. And muscle protein synthesis is where you build muscle, and you try and build and maintain any muscle that you have. And I always laugh when women go, well, all I've got is like rolls of fat. And I'm like, there's definitely muscle under there. Otherwise you'd be like a big bag of bones on the floor. That your muscular system supports your skeletal system. It's interconnected. And how muscle protein synthesis works is any protein that you eat gets broken down into the final state called amino acids. And amino acids are like the trigger that allows us to use that to build and regrow, restore, rebound all of our muscles in our body. And it's impacted slightly. And what it means is that the body actually requires a tiny bit more focus on protein to allow that to happen. So the protein fuels it, but the stimulus that makes it happen is strength training. And strength training is unique in the fact that it breaks down muscle fibers. When you're doing the resistant lifts, I mean, you can start with body weight for sure, but over time, your body's going to adapt pretty quickly to that as you get strong. Some body weight stuff will always be hard, like pull-ups and push-ups and stuff, but doing a body weight squat all of a sudden will become easier, and you're going to want to add weights to it. And when you get stronger, what happens is the muscle fibers tear apart and re-knot and rebuild. And also the bone as well, the muscle pulls away from the bone, and it creates like a stimulus that gets the osteoblasts all firing up and help build the strength in the bone. It's actually really hard to build muscle strength and bone strength. It's not like it's going to happen really quickly, and you're not going to get big and bulky. I mean, I've been trying to get like big and bulky, well, not big and bulky, but I've been trying to build my muscle for 20 years. It's not easy. But it's imperative. To me, it's one of those like no-brainers, because when we look at women who are elderly, like, and I'm talking like 65 and over, the women that fall are the ones with very poor muscle mass, with poor balance, poor mobility, the things that start to decline as we get older, and we proactively need to start looking at that. Sarcopenia is the idea that our muscle starts to sort of have degradation from about the age of 30 onwards, between 5 and 8%. I don't really know, it depends which study you're looking at, but it's accelerated through menopause. And it's largely happens because we're sedentary and we're getting older, but we can combat that with strength training. And so for somebody that wants to do other exercise, say you're a swimmer, runner, cyclist, walker, Zumba, or whatever it is you do, I would just say, good, don't stop doing it, because our cardiovascular health is so important to us. But consider maybe 2 days a week adding in a strength training class, and it doesn't have to be an hour long. It can be a 10-minute, 15-minute, just start somewhere. And it's actually why I wrote my book in a particular way. When I wrote the workouts, I did them in different rounds. So you do 4 to 5 rounds of every set of exercise I give you. And if one day you can only do 1 round, that's fine. But on the other days where you feel like you could seize the day, then yep, go and seize the day, right? Like, so just start where you're at and know that, you know, progress, especially if you're a beginner, will come pretty quickly as well, because, you know, being a beginner at something is actually awesome, because you do progress very quickly. Being like me, who's done it for years, progress slows down a lot, you know. It's unfortunate. Yeah.
Oh, I do see that. I mean, even restarting this latest round of my own strength training, you do see the impact pretty quickly.
Yeah,
and it's
good,
fun,
isn't it?
you know. And the other thing, like, again, just for myself, that I really had to get over, and I don't know, probably other women feel this way too, and you can tell me what you think, is, I mean, obviously you can do so many things at home, right? But for some reason, I think we can have this, but weight training is boring. That's what at least I have, right? But it's boring. Like, I like to go to a thing. I like a class. I like this or whatever. I like to be out in nature. So there's that. And then since I did join a gym, going into the free weight room was intimidating.
Yeah.
Right. And so getting over that hump, like teaching myself and telling myself, I deserve to be here just like anyone else in this gym.
Real fears, for sure.
Yeah. So what do you hear that, you know, and how do you speak to that? Like those two, like weight training's boring and I'm intimidated and all of that.
Yeah. And it's all also, like you said, like accessibility and, you know, accessibility from a financial standpoint, because not everybody can get a personal trainer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a big fan of working out at home, and I am a big fan of that, especially after COVID, because there's all of these great apps out there. You were talking about that you had a couple that allow you to sort of work in a community type setting in the comfort of your own home. But if you feel like doing that isn't getting you the progress you want, because you feel as though maybe you're shirking a little bit, or you're taking it a bit easy because nobody's watching you, because we're only human after all.
That's me.
Yeah, there's a number of things I would suggest. So first of all, if weight training is boring for you, then I would suggest either finding a community class that makes it a bit more exciting. And good places to start are things like these bar classes. And I don't mean bar like the ballet type classes. I mean, there's where you use weights within a class. And I don't particularly love them, but I think they're a good introduction to get you picking up a weight, understand what it feels like. It feels a bit odd at first. Things like F45 and Orange Theory have sort of got a decent model. Again, I don't love them because they don't use an intelligent progressive overload system, but they're a really good thing for building confidence and community. You go because, Sharon goes and you'll see her there, and you can go for a coffee afterwards. And so what we know from human nature and from motivation is that us fitness trainers don't all jump out of bed going, woohoo, let's go and train for the day. I never do that. I'm like the worst. But what we do know is that when you start exercising, it doesn't matter how small it is, whether it's body weight, like in the kitchen while dinner's getting cooked, that curiosity builds, and curiosity will then lead you to go, well, you know what? I used to be nervous about going to the gym, but there's now this weights class, and I'm going to start doing it. But then on the way to weights class, where you and Sharon go, you have to walk past the TRX area, and it looks fun and it looks cool, and you're starting to feel strong, and maybe you wouldn't mind trying that. And then you do this TRX class and you're like, Jesus, that was brilliant. And it was so much fun, because weight training is not boring. And
Yes.
now I really like the idea of what would it feel like to pick a dumbbell up? And honestly, that's how it works for almost anyone that does it consistently. It's just curiosity and consistency. And so that's what I would sort of say to that. The intimidation factor is very real in the free weights area. I've only ever had positive experience, especially from male colleagues who would be there. They are always supportive, but I know for a fact that women don't always have that experience. And so I would just say start in a different environment and work your way to that environment. And if you want to, work with a friend, buddy up. And if somebody comes over and tries to mansplain something to you, you just go, no thanks, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I get it totally.
Yeah, truly. And the other day I was in the gym and was in the free weight area, and there were 3 women. It's a smaller gym broken into different rooms. So the free weight area, there were 3 women and 1 man, and all the men in this gym are very supportive, and it's a really nice place. So, but at the end of my workout, I could not help myself, but I went over to each woman and just gave a fist bump. It's like,
I love that.
We are here. We are in the weight room. And they both knew exactly what was happening. They were like, we're here. Yeah, we got this. It's great.
It's like a sisterhood in strength. And here's the thing. When I started doing this 20 years ago, I would often be the only person in the gym with all of the grunty men that stunk, that wore the same clothes and that threw the weights down. And I'd be very respectful and quiet and put my weights back and stuff. But now when I go, there's as many men and women, and sometimes more. The environment's completely changed. And so I'm so happy about that. And so I think that most women will be surprised at how supportive the environment can be.
Truly, I agree with that completely. And another part for me with the strength training, and I love what you said about curiosity. It's so huge in every single aspect of our lives. And this is one of them, is maintaining curiosity. Don't shut the thing down. Carol Dweck's work about mindset, having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So just keeping that curiosity and really following that, and not being intimidated by it, right? Just what if, why not? I don't care if there's anybody here. I get to be here too.
There's a great doctor called Dr. Lisa Lewis, who did her PhD in this exact topic, and I had her on my podcast, and it was one of the best ones I've had, because it was talking about intrinsic and extrinsic motivations and stuff, and it's different for everybody, right? And so I totally love this conversation, and it opens the minds to women to make them realize that they don't have to just always be at home. There's different options out there, and that
It's
okay not to feel motivated all the time.
Tell you, absolutely. It's like, do it anyway, right? Do it anyway. No one has ever come back from a workout and been sad that they did it.
And you shouldn't ever feel like that. Yeah.
Always glad, always, always, always. So yeah, I appreciate that. And one last piece before we wrap up. One of the things that I find too with the strength training and really any movement in general is it puts me in my body. And when I'm more in my body, I'm more aware of the messages that my body is sending me. And so it's a really embodied practice, and our bodies are brilliant messaging systems, and we don't always know how to listen. So it's that like it I forgot where I heard this. It may have been on Andrew Huberman's podcast, and he was talking about exercise. And one of the things that it does is it affects our satiety. Like we understand our hunger cues better when we're exercising consistently, so that we know when we're full, and we'll actually be more sensitized to the awareness of fullness and when we're hungry.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, although sometimes like doing a lot of exercise can actually increase your hunger, and so that's something out of but you need to fuel. And I always say to, like, especially menopausal women, we're sort of like programmed historically to starve ourselves, and it's really not going to do you any good. Is don't ever feel such low energy because you haven't eaten enough. It's just not helpful to you at the moment. Like, fuel your workouts, make sure you've got your carbohydrates there for your glucose source, and then your protein there afterwards to help rebuild those muscles. But what happens through menopause as well, which is super interesting, adding on to the hunger hormone side, is that ghrelin and leptin, which is the one that, first of all, ghrelin's the one that it's easy to remember the name of it because it's like the gremlin, I think, like the growly feeling in your tummy. It tells you when you're hungry, and the leptin is released from fat cells through neurotransmitters to the brain to say, hey, you've eaten enough, you should be satisfied by now. And they get disrupted somewhat through perimenopause as well. And so that's something that you sort of can start to retrain your brain with, and by doing eating behaviors that support that, like eating slowly, so your body actually allows those those systems to be able to understand that you're satisfied with your food. If you rush your food, you just can't do that. And actually understanding what true hunger is, just pausing before you eat and going, is this true hunger? Am I thirsty? Should I just wait a little bit? Just having that thought is often enough to stop you just reaching for the cookies or the muffins mindlessly. Let's add in a mindful component to hunger. And so I just think that, like, if you know things like that are going to happen, then, like, I hear menopausal women say all the time, I'm never satisfied. I'm hungry all the time. Well, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. We know that. So what can you do about it?
Yeah. And actually, like, I love what you were saying about fueling the body. It is about that, right? If I feel hungry all the time, but I'm eating shit food, then you're still going to feel hungry all the time. The body isn't getting the nutrients that it needs. When the body is truly fed, then it's less likely to feel hungry. Maybe, it's that it's because it's getting the nutrients that it needs.
It's exactly that. And, that hyperpalatable ultra processed food is sort of engineered to make us want more. It's got low nutrient content, and it fuels the desire center in our brain that makes us want more. I mean, how many times have you opened a box of Pringles and only eaten one? You don't. Who does? And if you do, it's not possible. It's impossible. But like, if you have adequate protein satiates us. It really helps with controlling blood sugars as well. Fat fills us up as well. So, looking for your main fuel sources there, and then now and again having a treat, having your Pringles now and again is perfectly fine. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for your time. I could seriously talk to you all day because lots more to say about all these things.
I know we do, but this was a really great sort of starter and introduction. I hope it was helpful.
Oh, absolutely. And please tell us all the places where we can find you, and I'll link the book Menopocalypse, and I'll put all sorts of links in the show notes, but go ahead and tell us where we can find you.
Well, congratulations on saying it correctly, by the way. And also just go over to amandathebe.com. Everything's there. You can find all my social media, books, podcast, all there.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it, and have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Amanda. She is a wonderful advocate for menopausal women in so many domains. She is truly walking her talk, so very inspiring. And please subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your shows. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you also want to see these conversations. And please share with your friends and follow me, Angie.bird, on Instagram. This will all help the show gain momentum and help other women out there who are also looking to bring some magic and mayhem into their lives as well. And also, I do have a weekly newsletter, so please subscribe. You can go to angiebird.com/subscribe and sign up for my newsletter where you'll get a free download of my 10 minutes of magic.